In the tense atmosphere of an arena, a boxing match had just reached its conclusion. Excited cheers erupted from a crowd intently watching the match unfold on a television screen. The clinking of beer glasses mingled with lively chatter, creating a vibrant atmosphere. On the television screen, a boxer with blonde hair, a cold face hidden behind sunglasses, and a body riddled with battle scars was proudly raising his gloved hands. The commentator continued, stating that many veteran boxers, icons of the boxing world, had regrettably fallen to the powerful and brutal punches of this rising star. A devastating punch, swift as lightning, was delivered by the blonde boxer, landing squarely on his opponent's face. Fresh blood splattered into the air from the wound. The opponent, after taking the full force of the punch, collapsed onto the ring floor, blood streaming continuously from his mouth and nose. The face of another boxer, who was next to face the blonde fighter, showed clear tension and anxiety. The blonde boxer sat casually in the ring, the corner of his mouth curling into a smug and somewhat frightening smile. His smile grew increasingly sinister and unpredictable. He thought to himself, his tone provocative and ruthless, "Shall I kill you?" After a while in the ring, this boxer appeared terrified, trembling as he raised his hands, his voice stammering and broken, managing to utter that he wished to forfeit. The blonde boxer leaned back against the ropes, then burst into a long peal of laughter, the arrogant and contemptuous laugh of an absolute victor. Thus, the commentator's voice boomed eloquently, saying that this rising boxing star was using his unparalleled strength to send a resounding challenge to the entire boxing world. A short but weighty message appeared on the screen. A new generation of boxing king, a new legend of the boxing world is about to be born. A commentator, microphone in hand, his face clearly showing excitement and exhilaration, began his introduction, his voice full of anticipation. His name is... A thunderous roar of "Whoa!" erupted from all corners of the stadium. The commentator shouted the winner's name, the name that was taking the world by storm, Mike Tyson. 1 month later, at the quarterfinals of the prestigious National Boxing Championship titled The New King. Inside the boxer's waiting room, Mike Tyson was focused on his warm-up, his rippling muscles bulging beneath his skin. Mike Tyson emerged from the tunnel, his face exuding confidence and arrogance. The intricate scars on his body were like testaments to the fierce battles he had endured. In the brightly lit ring, Mike Tyson and his opponent, a dark-skinned boxer with distinctive dreadlocks, stood facing each other, their eyes blazing. Mike Tyson let out a sneer, his eyes sharp. The familiar bell rang, signaling the official start of the match, the atmosphere in the ring growing even hotter. The referee stood in the center of the ring, loudly declaring, his voice echoing throughout the arena. The match begins. As soon as the bell stopped, Mike Tyson lunged forward like a whirlwind, throwing a lightning-fast punch. Another powerful punch from Mike Tyson was unleashed. However, his opponent managed to dodge it skillfully. The opponent couldn't help but be astonished by Mike Tyson's speed and power. The dark-skinned boxer, after carefully observing Mike Tyson's attacks, suddenly noticed a momentary opening in his opponent. He silently cheered in his mind. Seizing the opportunity, the dark-skinned boxer threw a powerful uppercut, aiming straight for Mike Tyson's chin. The dark-skinned boxer swung his arm high, putting all his strength into the decisive punch, shouting loudly, his voice full of confidence. However, Mike Tyson, despite being at a disadvantage, maintained his composure, a slight smirk playing on his lips, as he thought something mysterious. Completely unexpectedly, Mike Tyson executed an unbelievable counterattack. He threw an extremely fast, extremely powerful punch, landing squarely on his opponent's face. The dark-skinned boxer didn't have time to react, only managing to let out a blood-curdling scream full of shock and pain. How can this be? The commentator in the stands, witnessing the spectacular counter-attack, couldn't contain his excitement, shouting into the microphone, his voice full of enthusiasm. There it is. That's the trump card, Mike Tyson's ultimate technique. The dark-skinned boxer, after receiving the devastating blow, collapsed onto the ring floor, unconscious. The referee stood beside the motionless boxer, beginning the countdown. The referee raised Mike Tyson's arm high, loudly declaring the result of the match. Mike Tyson wins! The stadium was ablaze with stage lights and showered in confetti. The commentator's voice continued to resonate, full of admiration. Mike Tyson once again demonstrates incredible power, a destructive form. After the match, in the locker room, a cry full of pain shattered the silence. Mike Tyson was sitting alone, a towel covering his head, one hand clutching his shoulder, moaning incessantly in pain. It hurts so much. Damn it! Suddenly, the phone rang shrilly, breaking the heavy atmosphere. Mike Tyson pressed the phone to his ear, his voice somewhat hesitant and faltering. He asked, is this Dr. Johan? Mike Tyson continued the call, his voice somewhat strained and unnatural. He said, It's me, Mike Tyson. The door to the operating room closed heavily. Above the door, the surgery in progress sign lit up, its faint red light creating a tense and mysterious atmosphere. Inside the operating room, the doctor spoke, his tone somewhat serious. It seems your endurance limit is only 3 matches. Mike Tyson grimaced from the tormenting pain. He tried to speak, his voice somewhat weak. That's precisely why I had to come find you. The doctor looked at Mike Tyson with worried eyes. He asked, his voice full of concern. Your current condition has clearly exceeded your body's endurance. Are you sure you still want to continue like this? Mike Tyson, though enduring excruciating pain, still appeared extremely resolute. He said, his voice firm, Of course, now is a crucial moment. The next Boxing King title must belong to me. The doctor carefully readjusted his medical mask, covering most of his face, revealing only eyes full of thought and worry. The doctor picked up a sharp scalpel from the tray of medical instruments. The gentle clink of metal against metal echoed in the silent operating room. The doctor used the scalpel to make a long, deep incision on Mike Tyson's bare back. The incision on Mike Tyson's back slowly opened, revealing something strange. Mike Tyson clenched his teeth tightly to endure the extreme pain, his entire body trembling. The doctor looked at Mike Tyson, his voice trying to maintain composure. He encouraged, Try to bear it a little longer. The doctor used his gloved hands, firmly gripping something inside the incision on Mike Tyson's back, then slowly pulled it forcefully out of his body. The doctor let out a blood-curdling scream, "Ah!" as what he pulled out was a large, slimy, bloody electric eel. He continued working, his voice slightly trembling. To ensure you have enough electrical power. The electric eel, just removed from Mike Tyson's body, writhed violently on the metal tray. The doctor pressed firmly on the open incision on Mike Tyson's back, trying to stop the bleeding and prepare for the next step. On another tray, a pile of used bloody electric eels lay heaped together, creating an incredibly gruesome and haunting sight. The doctor stood before a large glass tank filled with healthy, swimming electric eels. He spoke, his voice somewhat thoughtful. "Oh, right, there's one more thing." The doctor turned to look at Mike Tyson, who was still lying on the operating table, then asked, his tone somewhat probing, How are my wife and daughter doing now?" Mike Tyson, though still gasping from pain, tried to reply, his voice somewhat weak but still reassuring. "You can rest assured, they are both fine." The doctor reached into the glass tank, catching another electric eel. The large, healthy eel writhed violently in his hand. The doctor carefully placed the new, still-living electric eel inside the open incision on Mike Tyson's back. The doctor used a specialized medical instrument to gently apply a layer of ointment to the edges of the incision. The incision on Mike Tyson's back, under the effect of the medicine, began to slowly close, the skin edges gradually knitting together. Someone whispered, their voice full of astonishment, "Slowly, it's closing." The doctor looked at his hands, still stained with Mike Tyson's blood, then spoke, his voice somewhat tired. "All right, it's all done." Mike Tyson, after the new electric eel was implanted, slowly sat up from the operating table, his body seeming to have partially recovered its strength. Mike Tyson stood up from the operating table, taking steady steps onto the floor. Mike Tyson draped the bathrobe over himself, covering the scars and incisions. He turned to look at the doctor and spoke, his tone somewhat mysterious. "They said they really want to meet you." Suddenly, Mike Tyson's body began to emit faint blue electrical currents, enveloping his entire form. He said, his voice full of determination and ambition, "Just like me, I really want to win the championship." Mike Tyson approached, put his arm around the doctor's shoulder, and asked, his tone somewhat threatening, "We will achieve our desires together, right?" The doctor could only stammer in reply, Of course, of course." After Mike Tyson left the operating room, the doctor stood alone, his face darkened, his teeth clenched tightly. He thought to himself, his voice full of indignation and resentment, "Damn it!" 1 week later, at a modern high-rise building at night, inside an apartment, Mike Tyson sat on a comfortable sofa, his eyes fixed on the television screen replaying the scene of Mike Tyson's opponent being knocked out in the ring. This boxer, named Jake Paul, held a bottle of mineral water, his face showing clear contemplation and thoughtfulness. Jake Paul's face showed intense concentration. He was trying to analyze his opponent. Jake Paul still sat on the familiar sofa, his eyes glued to the promotional poster for the final match of the New King tournament to be held on May 18th. Suddenly, Jake Paul's mobile phone placed on the table rang shrilly. Jake Paul pressed the phone to his ear. His voice somewhat hesitant, he replied to the person on the other end. Jake Paul sat on the chair. A strange, somewhat mysterious voice came from the phone's speaker. "I know the secret behind Mike Tyson's strength, and I can help you win the upcoming final match. Are you interested in knowing?" The scene outside a private clinic. Inside, Dr. Johann sat comfortably on a sofa. Opposite him was Jake Paul. Dr. Johann spoke, his tone seemingly friendly. "Thank you for taking the time to meet me." Dr. Johann flashed a confident smile, asserting firmly, "Not just simply knowing, but I can also show you the specific method to convincingly defeat Mike Tyson." Dr. Johann continued, his voice full of sincerity. "The greatest wish of an ardent fan like me is to see my idol win. It's as simple as that." Jake Paul still appeared skeptical. He asked again, "How can I be sure that what you're saying is true?" Dr. Johann began to explain, his tone professional. "Previously, I spent a long time conducting research in the medical field, specializing in the activity of biological cells." Dr. Johann continued his coherent presentation. "The so-called activity of biological cells, you can simply understand it as the origin of muscle strength. Look at that table lamp over there." Dr. Johann further explained that these electric eels provide electrical energy, but the power they generate is only about 8 watts. Dr. Johann continued, his tone somewhat emphatic however. If another source of electrical energy is added, the power can increase up to 5 times compared to the original. Dr. Johann looked straight into Jake Paul's eyes, then affirmed with certainty, his voice full of mystery. This right here is the secret behind Mike Tyson's extraordinary strength. After hearing Dr. Johann's explanation, Jake Paul clenched his hands into fists, the corner of his mouth curling into a confident smirk. Time passed quickly. 1 week later, at the enormous stadium, the final match of the prestigious The New King tournament officially began, the atmosphere incredibly lively and tense. The stadium was packed with spectators, a continuous roar of "Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson," creating a fervent wave of sound that enveloped the entire arena. Mike Tyson stood proudly in the ring, his face showing clear complacency and some disdain for his opponent. Jake Paul stood opposite Mike Tyson, his eyes intensely focused, his mind constantly analyzing his opponent, thinking, "The back, it's the back." The referee stood between the two boxers, raised his hand, then signaled, his voice echoing, "Ready." Jake Paul thought to himself, his voice full of determination, "So the back is your fatal weakness." As soon as the call ended, Mike Tyson lunged forward to attack like a whirlwind, delivering a barrage of punches. Jake Paul nimbly dodged his opponent's attacks. One of Mike Tyson's punches grazed Jake Paul's face, a near miss. Jake Paul thought, his voice full of determination, "There's only one way. I have to risk it and see." Mike Tyson threw an extremely powerful punch, aiming straight at Jake Paul's face, a devastating attack. Jake Paul was sent flying backward by Mike Tyson's devastating punch, fresh blood starting to flow from the corner of his mouth and nose. He let out a blood-curdling scream, full of pain. Mike Tyson gave his opponent no chance to breathe or counterattack. He lunged forward like a wild beast, delivering the final finishing blow. Completely unexpectedly, just before Mike Tyson's fatal punch landed, Jake Paul somehow managed to dodge it spectacularly. Jake Paul, after dodging the dangerous attack, quickly turned around, faced the audience, and said loudly, his voice full of accusation, "Ladies and gentlemen present here, in truth, all of you have been deceived by the so-called mighty Hercules, Mike Tyson." Immediately after, Jake Paul threw an extremely powerful punch, aiming straight at Mike Tyson's back. Jake Paul continued to explain the truth to everyone. The main reason lies in his back. Hidden inside are electric eels capable of phenomenally enhancing cellular strength. The electric eels from inside Mike Tyson's back began to burst out uncontrollably, blood splattering everywhere, an incredibly gruesome scene. Those who witnessed the scene were utterly terrified. Mike Tyson clutched his aching body. Slimy electric eels wrapped tightly around him. Mike Tyson, his eyes as red as blood, his entire body trembling with anger and pain, lunged straight at Jake Paul like a wounded beast determined to fight to the bitter end. Completely unexpectedly, a sharp dagger, appearing from nowhere, plunged deep into Mike Tyson's chest, piercing through the solid muscle. He was stunned, only managing to utter a single sound. Mike Tyson collapsed onto the ring floor, blood pouring from the wound. The stadium erupted in an uproar, terrified screams echoing from all directions. Meanwhile, at an ordinary-looking house that concealed horrific secrets, Dr. Johann threw open the door of the house. Inside, a woman and a little girl were cowering in fear. The woman and the little girl clung to each other in a corner of the room, constantly calling out, their voices full of fear. Dr. Johann rushed over, embracing his wife and daughter, tears streaming down his face. That day, the news reported that yesterday, at the final match of the National Boxing Championship, the new king, an unfortunate incident occurred. Contestant Mike Tyson, one of the strong contenders for the championship, suddenly died in the ring due to the use of banned substances. Currently, the incident is still under urgent investigation by the authorities to clarify the matter.